right, here we are, Italian High Renaissance, Part 1, because there's quite a bit to cover in the High Renaissance. And when we think about art history, so many people automatically think of the big names: Donatello, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael. Yes, we will get to all of them, but today we're going to be looking at these three: Giotto, Donatello, and Da Vinci. It should be pretty not well known, but the word Renaissance is all about rebirth. It's actually a French term that's rebirth, to rejuvenate, basically. And we see this a lot in art history, where it seems like we always go back to the classics, and then we really get into something, and it gets kind of muddied up, and people's ideas of it change, but then there's a return. So the Italian Renaissance is a time of rebirth and new ideas. The era was exemplified by experimentation in government, art, psychology, and sociology. Florence happened to be the city at the forefront of all these developments. Now, think about this. It's a lot like Greek and Roman civilizations. It was about experimentation in government, art, psychology, sociology. So it's kind of a rejuvenation. Right? So Florence was a clear leader in all realms of Renaissance arts, including sculpture, architecture, painting. At the root of Renaissance art was the rejection of the medieval Gothic art and the rebirth of ancient Grecian art. So we are kind of coming back to the ideal, to the study of humankind. Okay, where medieval art was concerned with somber spiritual themes, Renaissance art, while still concerned with the spiritual aspects of things, it expressed a sense of control over one's own destiny that medieval art did not have. In this way, humanism pervaded Renaissance art. Humanism is an approach in study, philosophy, and practice that focuses on human values and concerns. I feel like we've done this, but that's what art, life, all that stuff does. It kind of repeats itself. There's always a transition. Okay, now I like to talk about technical ideas, and for that I like to look at a man named Giotto, and we kind of consider him the father of the Renaissance, because if you look at the dates, 1267 to 1337, it's still quite I don't know, kind of early for the Renaissance, what's known as the Renaissance. He did something technically that kind of propelled the era. Let's look at some old artwork. We've looked at some of the things in the past, the medieval art, the distorted figures, specifically if you look at the way, I don't know, in the top there, the short, squat individuals, that it's not that was intentional. It was intentional, but it's just that it was not accurate. Also, if you look at the backgrounds, of like manuscripts and whatnot, there's just this shallow sense of space, right? And then, of course, we look at Bosch, which I think is super awesome, but still has that kind of distorted figure thing. Anyways, the thing we will look at next is quite interesting in the way space is dealt with. And I think that's kind of the big concept here. Let's take a look at Giotto's fresco painting. Okay? It's a lamentation. It's, Christ coming down from the cross, being held by Mary. Yeah, not sure if, how that played out, but that's what art does. It brings us those scenes, that imagery. Okay, and I don't know, you might look at it and go, well, what's really the difference? I mean, it's kind of the same exact thing as we just saw, or is it? Look at the way these figures are presented. Look at the way they're in that stiff, rigid, shallow space. Now look at this. There's a sense of space. There's a sense of humans interacting with each other. There's like this stage setting that shows depth. Look at these figures in the front, right there, in the green and the yellow. They frame the center of interest. They actually frame the important part of the story. So it still very technically brings our eye to the main point. And that's kind of a big deal. I know that doesn't seem like a big deal because that's something we, look at, or, you guys were taught. But that's not something that was done very often. You might be asking yourself, why all the splotchiness? Why does it look like it's a puzzle put together? But we go back and we look at the artwork, fresco making, how it was done in sections and painted like one day at a time, like a section at a time. So that's why you kind of see those differentiations in color specifically in the background. Let's take a closer look at that detail. Again, notice how the line of the stone wall leads right to the heads of Mary and Christ. That's the center of interest. This very human interaction and staging of a scene was revolutionary compared to the earlier versions of the same story. One can see realistic use of light and shadow as well. Yeah. And just as a refresher, here's an example of somebody doing some fresco painting, kind of on a rough wall, some wet plaster, then of course painting the image that gets basically sealed in. So that's a transitional item. And you might think, well, really, is that it? That's what makes the Renaissance the Renaissance? The fact that it looks a little more realistic and there's some sense of space and more human interaction? Yeah, well, that's the start. That's why it's a transition. So again, we're going to be looking at 4 really important artists. Yes, the turtles. We have Leonardo, we have Donatello, we have Raphael, we have Michelangelo. I really like that cartoon. And the comic books. Anyways, the Italian High Renaissance was lucky enough to have 4 incredibly gifted artistic geniuses living at about the same time and in roughly the same area of Italy, as I said before, Florence. Right? In fact, they were and are so famous that 2 comic book authors named their mutant turtles after them. These guys were from New York, not Italy, though. So just for your reference, bam, Italy, right? Florence, bam, kind of up there in the top. Right? If you ever go to Florence, it is just littered with beautiful artifacts of that time. All right, so our first artist, not so much of a transitional figure, but it's Donatello. He's kind of the old guy of the bunch. He was primarily a sculptor. He's kind of known for bringing in the sense of the human psyche and a change of perspective of the way we view artwork. So speaking of the human psyche, take a look at this wood sculpture. It's Mary Magdalene. It embodies a rather sobering look at the penance she inflicted upon herself. Being out in the woods for a long time as penance, right? This move to showcasing personal reflection and showing emotional disposition in art is an underlying theme in the Renaissance art. I mean, you can feel the pain, suffering, and just the raggedness of it through that texture. Man, I mean, if this doesn't instill an emotional response in you, I don't really know what does. The way the hair kind of drapes around her face to create an even more skull-like appearance. A really famous work, and actually kind of one of my favorite works from Donatello, is his Lo Zoccone, which translate from Italian as idiot or dimwit. Not very nice, I know. It's a popular name given to the marble statue by Donatello. Now, he really liked it, though. It was commissioned for the bell tower of the Cathedral of Florence, and if you go there, you can actually see a copy of it, actually. And it was completed about 1425. It's also known as the statue of the prophet, I'm going to mess this up, Habakkuk. Did I do that okay? As many believed, it depicted the biblical figure Habakkuk. The statue is known for its realism and naturalism. What do you know? Going back to like that classical idea of naturalism, like a human body that actually looks like a human body, even in the back, which viewers would not be able to see when installed because it was kind of in this niche thing. Zucconi is reported to have been Donatello's favorite, and he has been claimed to swear by the sculpture. By the faith I place in my Zucconi, Donatello is said to have shouted, "Speak, Daniel, speak!" as the marble, as he was carving it. Man, I can't even read my own words. Yeah, sometimes an artist gets a little bit into their own work. Yeah, he just felt it was so, lifelike and humanistic. He really got into it. Our next sculpture is very interesting, and it's the start in a series of sculptures that are going to be really important in the Renaissance, especially in Florence, and that is David. And we've heard of the David, and this is probably not the David that you're thinking of. This is Donatello's David. He shows a young, brave, and rather sensual, fashionable warrior. With David, you can clearly see a move towards a classical ideal human in pose and technical execution. This is a bronze sculpture, and if you don't know the story of David and Goliath, David is kind of a patron saint of Florence because it always felt like the underdog, the small guy, and this David is a young boy, as he was in the Bible. And he was confronted with, the champion of the opposing army, which was Goliath, this big giant monster sort of dude. And it is said that he stripped himself of his armor, and only through his wit that he was able to defeat Goliath. He didn't do it through brawn. He did it through a slingshot. He slung a stone, hit him in the head, basically knocking him out, slicing his head off. Bam. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, right? And there we can even see the rock in his left hand. How cool is that? So he is showing the disrobement of his armor, and actually a nice detail you can see on the back is some of that armor in of course, the head of Goliath. And he wears a cool hat too. It kind of is. Look at the pose. My gosh. I mean, remember contrapposto? I don't think you could get more contrapposto than that. Just gorgeous. Just that bronze and the smoothness of it is really something to be, admirable. That's very admirable. Here's a few details of that sculpture. Donatello did quite a few other sculptures in his time. Probably my favorite, for whatever reason, I can't even explain why, is Saint George. The shield is one of the reasons I've always kind of used that motif in my own artwork for some reason. For whatever reason, I don't even know much about Saint George. But yeah, he did a lot of civic work, and that's what you'll be seeing a lot of. Moving along, we have our next very, very famous artist, Leonardo da Vinci. You've heard of this guy, I'm pretty sure. So if there's one person to embody anything and everything about being the Renaissance man, it is da Vinci. Okay? He is known for so many things. What people don't always know him for, and this is really important to like the drawing and painting class, is his sketchbooks. And it's also because that's where a lot of the evidence of the type of man he is, or was, is. To be of the Renaissance mind, one must not only focus on the singular subject or simply partake in repeating the same action, but to explore, design, learn, and go beyond the bounds set by the status quo. What do you know? It's almost like it's what I'm trying to teach you to do, to become a student of the world, to become the scientist, to understand nature, to do that through observation, reflection, repeating. Okay? And then for you sculpture people, the design people, it's about testing that product. right? Researching the need, right? And creating something out of that. For Da Vinci, this meant becoming a student of not only art, but science. In order to create new things in the world, he must first understand what it is made of. Da Vinci's notebooks and sketches are indicative of his mindset. While controversial at the time, he studied the anatomy of human cadavers, created and test machinery, and was not afraid to experiment with technology. He's known for making like helicopters and tanks and flying saucers and all that kind of stuff. Man, I think you can still purchase a full set of his sketchbooks, but just the anatomical references, again, to actually study an actual human body, was something that they didn't really do in medieval times. They did it certainly in Grecian times. So he's really, really known for his sketches and paintings, and we'll get to more of those. But for you sculpture people, he actually did do a sculpture of sorts. He designed one. It was commissioned of Da Vinci in 1482 by the Duke of Milan, where Da Vinci spent a lot of his time in Milan, but it was not completed. It was intended to be the largest equestrian statue in the world, a monument to the Duke's father, Francesco Sforza. Da Vinci did extensive preparatory work for it, but produced only a clay model, even though he had the whole casting process figured out, which would have been revolutionary in casting technology. Being a bronze caster, being somebody who has cast bronze for a living, it's a big process, and there is a video, this video that is linked on this, goes into that to some degree, but they did end up making this sculpture, and it's a pretty neat video, so be sure to check it out. Probably his most famous artwork, bam, The Last Supper. You've all seen it. You all know that there's all this mystery and intrigue behind it, but I'm going to argue that one of the greatest aspects of it is its use of one-point perspective. Right? It's in bad shape. The fresco was not really executed correctly, which is interesting because Da Vinci was pretty thorough about what he did. We see an incredibly important concept that is introduced at this time, and you're going to think, really? Really? Pure and perfect perspective. It is interesting how a biblical story is set also in a non-accurate location, as well as a table that would not have been used at the time it's supposed to portray. So we see this a lot, and we'll see it especially in Baroque art, how artists transplant their cast and they put them in a time machine and they put them in their own time, which is interesting because it is a story. It's not always accurate to what would have happened, but for the people of the time to understand it, they would put them in their own setting and time. Here is that one-point perspective, all those orthogonals, the tops and bottoms of those windows, the size of the table, they all go to that vanishing point on the horizon line, which is located right in Jesus's head. So, for those of you in drawing and painting, this should look pretty familiar to you. There it is in a different format. Da Vinci was pretty obsessed with the whole concept of bringing your eye into certain subjects, moving your eye around. Here's two paintings. They are different paintings. There is called Madonna of the Rocks. They're slightly different. Notice the soft edges attributed to the use of oil paints. Ooh, oil paints like Van Eyck. Da Vinci exploited the qualities of this new media. Now, recall Van Eyck, and that was the Northern Renaissance artist. This is happening around the same time, just in a different area. So you can definitely see the regional styles changing here. Check out the attention to detail in the nature and deliberate compositional choices. He loved rocks in his paintings. These are two different paintings, but very similar in composition and the way your eye is kind of moved around via the gaze of the characters, or them like literally pointing where you should look next. Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, dun 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 dun. Probably the most famous picture in the world. Why? I don't know. Three-quarter pose, fumato, accurate anatomy, ambiguous and faded background. Huh, huh. Really? Is that what it, how important is that? These are a lot of compositional techniques that I am trying to teach you. Let's go through these because there is a video. There is a video on the next slide, and so I do invite you to, of course, watch that. And it explores those elements. Now, three-quarter pose. That's where somebody is not face forward or in profile. It is kind of showing them turned away or turned towards you. Yeah, that was kind of, kind of became the standard. We're so used to seeing it. But Da Vinci kind of made it the thing to do. Let's see. Sfumato. What does that word mean? It kind of means smokiness. Very soft, gentle texture. The transition of light and dark. Okay, that kind of smoky look, very blending of the paints to make it look soft. That's what's referred to as fumato. It kind of adds a sense of realism. Okay? Accurate anatomy. Huh, go figure, right? Ambiguous and faded background. Now, the background, all on its own, is something to talk about. For one thing, technically speaking, it's not crisp and clear and precise, kind of like those Van Eyck paintings that we saw a few weeks ago. They're very soft, gentle, faded, and they have atmospheric perspective. An interesting point about this particular painting is that the backgrounds seem to be at different, like there's the horizon line's kind of different, and the roads don't really match up, and they don't really match on one side of the head to the other. So weird, huh? There is a stone wall behind her, but I think it's kind of darkened over time. Anyway, definitely watch a video, but you don't think about things like, hey, it's a faded background, big deal. Well, it was a big deal. It revolutionized the way they did portraiture. Right? Yeah. And here is a deeper look into what makes Renaissance art in general so revolutionary of the time. And again, if you look at Gothic art and that transition, it's a pretty big jump. Right? So, didn't take too long today, but we'll talk more next week with Raphael and Michelangelo, which I tend to kind of go on about Michelangelo as him being probably my most favorite artist. But just like the Renaissance mind, there is too much just to fit in this small space. So again, this is just kind of the introduction, the early Italian Renaissance. Whoa, I can't even read my own writing here. Ideas and revisiting classicism, remember the Greek ideal, has made the Italian High Renaissance one of the most studied and revered periods in art history. Giotto broke the static medieval form and presented his figures in dynamic, realistic, and engaging compositions. Donatello's subtle and humanistic sculptures touch on the humanistic disposition in sculpture. And of course, Da Vinci was a master of understanding both the humanistic and technological qualities that define the Renaissance goal of innovation and beauty. Right? So for those of you in drawing and painting, you're going to probably rush to those questions and answer them. So that's cool. That's good. Now in 3D design, we do a little something extra. We do our technical drawings, right? Our drawings in multiple angles and in scale, a very marketable skill to have. So this week, we're going to be looking at Donatello. Okay, I do like the idea of looking at his David, because it goes right back to that classical idea of the human nude. And it has that gorgeous contrapposto, that beautiful movement, okay, that accurate anatomy. It's a great sculpture, okay. This is option number one, okay, and I have a few options, and I'll have a few options in the coming weeks, but this option is because I really think it has that beautiful, graceful movement. Also notice the negative space and how its silhouette defines the attitude. But if you want to do a little more study in fabric or drapery, because I know some of you might prefer that, there's this option number 2, and that is his Lo Zuccone. He seemed to like this sculpture a lot, and why shouldn't you? I just love that huge, massive drapery that crosses over his shoulder and down right to his ankles. So that's kind of a interesting one. Also in the back shot of this really kind of simplifies some drapery, and because it wasn't really seen, but that might be a good thing to study. All right, so you do have a choice. David or Lo Zuccone. So for your multi-angle drawings, if you want to do all of them, cool, great, awesome. But again, you get to choose. Now, I am going to do a quick little pointing out of the fact that there is an appendix to this. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I'll really quick just kind of say it's about the Mona Lisa and how it was stolen and how it was in a broom closet, or who was in a broom closet. There's something about a broom closet, and there's nationalism, and there's people being heroes for stealing something. What? For that, read about the Mona Lisa and how it was stolen from the Louvre in Paris, France. I'm going to let you guys read that one on your own. Here's a quick preview. Got all that? Got all that? Yeah, I bet you did. All right. So, Lo Zuccone, David, and for those of you in drawing and painting, questions. I hope you found something inspiring in today's lesson. Maybe something you didn't know. Maybe a sculpture or a painting from one of these artists that you have not seen before. All right. Well, let me know if you have any questions, and by all means, please do further research, do further study, pick up a book, and just look at the pictures. All right. Have fun with that.